Budget Committee Republican Paul Ryan of Wisconsin says the country is heading toward a debt crisis if it doesn't confront its spending, and that Republicans will oppose tax increases, which will likely result in deep, unpopular budget cuts, which he insists are not like austerity cuts being imposed in Europe.
We're not preaching austerity. We're preaching growth and opportunity. What we're saying is, if you get our fiscal ship fixed, you preempt austerity. Here's what a debt crisis is. A debt crisis is what they have in Europe, which is austerity. You cut the safety net immediately. You cut retirement benefits for people who've already retired. You raise taxes, slow down the economy. Young people don't have jobs. That's the austerity that comes when you have a debt crisis. And when you keep stacking up trillion-dollar deficits like this government is doing, it's bringing us to that moment.
But University of Massachusetts Amherst economist Richard Wolff disputes Ryan's comments.
Congressman Ryan is either pathetically uninformed or, not to put too fine a point on it, a liar. I'll never figure out which. Maybe he can't either. Here's the problem. There's a clear definition of austerity. Austerity is when the government responds to an economic crisis by cutting spending and by raising taxes in various combinations. The Republican Party and Mr. Ryan have been enthusiastic for an austerity policy and pursuing it for years. They prefer more spending cuts rather than tax increases, but they've gone along with tax increases too. For example, the one that was just allowed, namely moving the payroll tax from what it was in 2012, 4.2% on everybody's wage and salary check each week, up to 6.2%. A 40% increase in a basic tax on the American working class. To combine a rising tax like that, which we just did for 2013, together with the spending cuts that the Republicans, led by Mr. Ryan, are demanding, is not doing something to avoid austerity. It is austerity.
Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press this morning, Ryan said automatic spending cuts are scheduled to take hold because, in his words, Democrats have opposed our efforts to replace those cuts with others. Democrats have insisted taxes be part of the equation to prevent across-the-board spending cuts that are set to hit the Pentagon and many domestic programs. The spending cuts were set in motion in the hopes of spurring lawmakers to strike a large-scale deal to reduce the deficit. Ryan also claimed high corporate tax rates were hurting U.S. competition in the world market.
We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. We're taxing our small businesses now at rates higher than corporations. We should have lower tax rates so we can be competitive. When we tax our job creators more than our foreign competitors tax theirs, they win, we lose.
But economist Richard Wolff says Ryan's definition of corporate tax rates doesn't tell the whole story.
The corporate rate is not what most corporations pay, because most corporations have the legal right to take exemptions and deductions. Any responsible economist who isn't a shyster knows that what's important is the actual rate corporations pay, not the rate that you begin to look at before you take your deductions and your exemptions. When you do that, the American corporation pays roughly the same as their counterparts in Europe. The reason, for example, is that while they have a lower top rate in Europe, they give corporations fewer loopholes, fewer deductions and exemptions. Whereas in the United States, where we have a higher rate, we give corporations more exemptions and deductions. The only honest comparison is what you actually pay. And by that standard, American corporations are already on a par with others. To cut the rates further would give the American companies an advantage, which is exactly what Mr. Ryan and the Republicans want to do, hoping that those corporations reward them with the money that will finally allow them to win the elections that have eluded them so far.
He's talking about unfair competition of U.S. corporations. Is it not slightly unfair to U.S. corporations to have medical, what they call legacy costs, that European corporations do not have to deal with because they have single-payer health care?
Yes, it is absolutely the case that American corporations have failed to be in support of a national health insurance for the American people. It is charming, having failed to put their weight behind the effort to get, for example, a single-payer system such as they have in Canada, or a national health service such as they have in England, or France, or Germany, or Italy, or Spain, or all the other countries over there. The American corporate structure, having failed to support it, now complains like a whining child that they're not getting the benefits. Hello, if you want the benefits of a national health, then get out there and make it happen. If American corporations threw their weight behind a national health service, we would have had it decades ago. And so I don't want to hear from them, and it is disingenuous, and I'm being as polite as I know how, for them to complain about that. And if you are going to complain, well, let's do some other complaining. In Europe, there is a very high degree of unionization. Corporations in Europe, private companies, have to deal with workers that are well organized and able to get decent wages, good benefits, and etc. They are outcompeted by Americans, corporations, who don't have that problem. According to the Bureau of Labor statistics released last week, the percentage of American private employees represented by a union is now down to 6.7%. That means over 93% of private workers in America are not represented by a union. That gives corporations an immensely greater advantage over their European and Japanese counterparts than anything having to do with healthcare costs. So if you want to start racking up the different conditions that affect the competitiveness between Americans and corporations, then either make a complete list or stop horsing around and misrepresenting the situation.
Economist and author Richard Wolff's weekly show, Economic Update, can be heard on many Pacifica radio stations and is a free podcast download. House Budget Committee Chair Paul Ryan was the 2012